like sort of 15 minutes. I thought, as I said at the beginning, we'll just do more of a reflective discussion, more interactive, not just me sitting here, this is helpful, this is not helpful. Because I can just be a PowerPoint bitch as well and just give you slides of dot points of helpful things, but I just don't think that's, when you invite lived experience voice in, you kind of want to talk to the person, and I want to talk to you, and then I'll learn as well. And so I have a few slides here. Don't be patronised, I'm sure you've all studied Carl Rogers. This is more to remind me of examples of from my own experience, what was helpful. And I love the idea of empathy for me, I think, is probably the most important. And I think over our history, we originally sort of saw ourselves as quite self-interested, and we had self-driven, that humans actually were really quite into it, that we were self-interested, and we actually always had our own agendas, and we were really more focused on ourselves. And I think empathy has become more, I think it's been shown over time that at that same time, yes, we are that, evolutionarily, like we are that. We've evolved that way, but we are also empathetic, and we do have empathy. But I think some of it can get skewed over time. I think even some of the Rogerians, some Carl Rogers ideas were sort of, as he said himself, they were caricatured over time, where it's this non-directive therapy where, and even if you lose your track of it, just reflect the last sentence they said to you, and it just is not, well, that's not really the, so empathy is something so, I just don't think that we can be working in mental health if we just don't have that, or at least that passion and will to develop those skills as much as possible. I think they're sort of naturally there in most people. Humans can be very empathetic, and the studies that show that can develop as early as 2. It's there. But Carl Rogers says these, I wrote some of these last night, I love some of these, that just listening to people in a way that's, when you're deeply present and you're engaging with such presence, and it's a lot of what has been helpful to me has been in what was not said to me, was just in the space that was created and the way that I was made to feel. And you don't always need to talk a lot to do that. It's kind of, when I first started in peer support, I thought my job was to give advice. I know all this stuff, you should do this, it worked for me. It's this really reductive understanding of helping people, thinking, I'll give suggestions of what to do. And I think that we can go a bit awry when we go into problem solving. I'm seeing a problem here, I better offer a solution, because we all have this natural thing, I better solve this problem for this person, and then I'll have done a great job. And a lot of it is that we don't want solutions, or that if we do, we can actually find them in ourselves. Everyone knows enough about themselves. Deep down, you can uncover your own solution. And if you come up with it yourself, you feel more you're being self-directed. You feel you come to your own epiphany. So what helped for me, and maybe I'll reflect this to you now, and you can give me some thoughts, is that what I found really helpful with my psychotherapy and in this relationship was not someone to give me solutions, or even not someone to even sometimes talk me through all these feelings and reflect with me, but someone to, because I'm an expert in me, and I think there's always been this thing that therapists, psychologists, OT, social workers, mental health, they're the expert, and they're there to help sort you out. But there's been this quite a global shift. I don't know if global shift's the right word, but there's this movement that actually it's better to have those interactions where no one is viewed as an expert over another, and that even you've got all this theoretical knowledge, which you definitely use, is really helpful, and to do all this clever stuff that will help and massively benefit. But if you position yourself as, I'm just in a space with you, and I just want to talk, and I want to listen, and let's see what happens from that. I've got all these tools, but let's build a relationship first. So I think when we come away, when we locate the power and the meaning and the expertise in the person, that's really, really good. So for me, what I loved in some of my sessions was not all the talk and the, give me a solution, give me some techniques for anxiety. What I needed was an expert facilitator. Someone to facilitate my emotional journey and help me grow through that. And actually both people grow with empathy. Empathy actually benefits the people that are doing it and the other person. It's a brilliant reciprocal thing. So I didn't want an expert to give me all these strategies and I just wanted an expert facilitator to give me a journey. So I don't know if any of you have any of your own little examples of, like, when you hear me saying that that's something that I, at a lot of points, have preferred. What does that, I presume you're understanding what I mean, that I love a space where there's as little power imbalances as possible, where it's just two people building a relationship, but one has a lot of expertise in how to facilitate the right kind of thing and the right kind of talk and help me get dialogue out. So, and I presume I don't know whether you're trained. I'm not trained as a psychotherapist. So I'm just saying this is me giving a sort of an example of what I found really nice in some of my sessions.
I think it's actually really comforting to hear, because I think I haven't come from a mental health background, so it's all the theory that I'm reading is really new to me, and I think I can get really bogged down in what I don't know the right thing to say to this person. How can I fix them? How can I solve it? But when you say that, it actually brings me back to why I came back and studied this in the beginning, because just that real connection with someone.
And I think we do naturally, when someone says something, you want to say something really comforting. Quick, say something really comforting. And then when you're a professional, you're going through that, this is the response, because you've got this training and it's in there. But I think if you actually just talk to someone in the same way that if your nephew, your son, your granny, or your mum, or your husband comes to you and says, I've got this problem, I feel really bad. What's the first thing you say when someone in your family comes? Like, the response is usually, cuddle, it's going to be okay. That sounds really simplistic. It's like, well, I'm a therapist with a degree, I'm going to say it's going to be okay. I have to know that a lot of times it's not okay. But in our human experience, from when we're tiny, when we fall off our bike and graze our knee, we go to mum or dad, we effectively want a magic kiss. I want to cuddle. Let's try this, okay? Because mummy's here with you. And we actually, I found, from my own personal opinion, this is what I study, this is how I feel, is that as I've grown up, I actually just still want that. I probably need lots of other proper help, but initially in the relation building, I just want someone to go, it's going to be okay, because I'm with you, and we can do it together, and most people eventually resolve, it's going to be okay. There are terrible journeys here or there, and you can end up forward, backwards, sideways, but ultimately, a lot of us do well with getting help and support and with our relationships. So relationships are, I did a lecture for ECU a while ago, and one of the, I did a bit of a rant about the clinical side of things, and they said, but as a clinician, I've got to do all these things. I said, yes, you do, and you can't be a complete maverick and just break all the laws. We have to do risk assessments and your crisis plan, and all this paperwork that we do, basically for litigious reasons, doesn't really benefit most people on deep levels. And she said, but what can I do then? And I said to her, if you can just meet someone wherever they're at and just put a lot of your technical language there and come in as an equal and say, I'm really interested and I'm so want to help. I can't imagine some of the stuff you're going through, but I'm coming in with all my empathy and my passion, and I'm completely present. And I just want to build a relationship with you where we're both going to benefit. I'm going to learn stuff too, because I've never met you before. So obviously I'm going to learn, and hopefully you're going to come up with me great. And I'm going to create this space. You can help me and tell me what you think is going to create this great space. And we'll do that. And sometimes I might reflect some personal experience and I want to be honest, because I think honesty is really good. And I know we have, like, I don't know where you all work or are going to work, but in like statutory services, they have those policies on, what's it called, something about self-disclosure, where, because normally clinicians are sort of encouraged not to do that. And I think that's why the peer support worker positions and this global, the consumer workforce happen, because peer support just has great. Oh, I was going to talk about that later. But if you can share stuff and just be really honest, and if you can put a bit of your own vulnerability into it, you're always going to have a better relationship. Like people are going to go, because we get trained into, not we, I'm in a peer position, but generally clinicians get trained into this poker face, You're professional. You have this knowledge and skills and you're there to help people and you're responsible and you've signed confidentiality agreements and you've signed a duty of care and done all this stuff and you've done all your plans and you've got to be professional and you've got to be boundaried, because that's professional. Boundaries, all this emotional distancing that psychiatry has really gone to town with, actually it's probably counterproductive, because the idea of healing and going through therapy with someone is a deeply human experience. So when you get this professional, poker face, boundary, distance person, it's not. I mean, it can work. I've had great professionals that have helped, but it would have been really nice if I just felt like I was standing in the room with Sarah, just doing an hour of exploring, and that would, So those are the sessions that have really helped me. I was going to ask you guys. Overrun. I'll get next slide. I can send all these. You probably this is actually from one of the YouTubes, not from his. I haven't pulled all his research papers because I didn't have time to actually do a big proper reference slide, so I did all this from the YouTube. But I noticed I had a quick chat about stigma earlier, so just make a quick point. And it was years ago, and I'm going to give you all the exact examples. But I noticed you're talking about stigma. And I found that sometimes in this whole, 15-year or life journey that I've had, and I've written here that sometimes it can be perceived as stigmatising if you might offer or suggest a solution that is this quite expected norm, this is how the community works, and you'll fit in if you can do this, and if you can, and I hate this thing, you need to moderate your emotions, you need to be more like me, because I'm normal, I don't have a mood disorder, so you need to learn when to, it's like, well then why should I do that? Why do I have to do that? I'm a human being. I'm allowed to go and be angry one day, and obviously there are certain demarcations, like when I go to work at the clinic, and I'm in a bad mood, I try to be professional in that. But as a person, I should just be able to go anywhere and be who I am. And so I think we do a lot of this moulding people to be normal. And I don't know if there is a normal, because I know lots of people and none of them are the same. We all have lots of similarities and just as many differences. So I think it's just a natural part of the human condition. And we can label people, you've got schizophrenia, or you've got a mood disorder, or you've got borderline personality disorder, and no one knows what that means. It's just, seriously, I've looked at it's just, the DSM was created on 12 to 15 white, middle-aged, privileged guys who wanted something handy to do, which, it makes sense in any profession to have a manual that makes things handy. But there was no sign. When that was created, one of them said, we can't put that in there. I do that, that's me, I do that. Oh, that's not a disease, though. And irrespective of the fact that still today is no evidence from anyone anywhere in the world that mental illness is actually an illness, that it's a biological psychiatry has just pumped out this thing in conjunction with Big Pharma that we're all in balance, and there's hormones, and there's all these underlying mechanisms which we target with drugs, not medication, psychoactive drugs, and we actually don't know that. There's not even a really good convincing hypothesis and strong compelling evidence to support it about what one of the underlying biological mechanisms of one of the so-called millions of disorders we have, and we just give people drugs saying this is correcting it. It's like it's not correcting it, it's causing changes in your brain through toxicity that make you more palatable to society. No, we're not presenting drugs in a drug-centred way. Like, I can give you this that'll make things easier for a while. It should really be short-term, because what it actually does is this. It's not curative or corrective. It's not correcting an underlying imbalance, because there's no evidence, but we don't know what that is. We're sort of still guessing on that. Like, psychiatry started off quite psychoanalytic, and people who came up with some early drugs actually took them themselves and wrote about all the bad stuff it did. And we had social psychiatry, and it was quite good, and we veered off thanks to Eli Lilly and Big Pharma on chemical imbalance. And before that, we were on hormones. These people have their hormones are all wrong. You know, they've got hormone imbalances. And then we were off on neurotransmitters, and serotonin and all this stuff. And the chemical imbalance myth just took off. It's still there. We had this really weak dopamine hypothesis, which has hung around and that's one of the quite weaker theories. And now we're on immunology, right? So I'm sick because of something. So I'm just into the. I might not be sick. I might just be me. I'm just like this person. I just have this horrific stuff, and this is how I cope and behave. And there are ways for me to work through that and heal and be okay like everybody else. And I shouldn't have to change to be accepted by the communities that I'd like to join. So yeah, I should stop and let you guys talk, because I'm so passionate. I veer off. As you notice, I veer off onto things because I'm just so passionate about so many different areas. But that was my sort of thoughts on stigma, is that some of us, it'd be nice just to be supported in who we really are, because I think eventually society needs to change. You can't just individualise, oh, this is sick people, it's your problem. It's a social justice problem, yeah, it's a social problem. People are oppressed, and that it sort of comes into it as well. We face social injustice, we face structural oppression, we face all these things that nobody else faces because of the label we were given that wasn't even really medical or scientific in the first place, and we're stuck with it for life. So I can't get life insurance, okay? So I don't deserve what you guys get. In this room, you all guys get life insurance, I don't. Oh, I found one, it took me 2 weeks and 13 phone calls, but I pay double what you guys pay. So I am a second class, I can't get rid of that now. That's been labelled on me, it's in my life forever. It's been put there and it can't be removed. So this is the systemic discrimination and the stress that when we're in a therapeutic relationship, we're also going to have a bit of that, what I can't pronounce his surname. I was actually just watching his YouTube last night, and he said this thing about outrospection, and and actually one of my favourite clinical psychiatrists, Joanne Moncrief, talks a lot about taking into account where we are in the world. People are more stressed these days, and there are social issues, so we need to take a tailored approach, but also, have this thing, this outrospection that's Roman Kosinick talks about. So my final slide, I was going to let you guys just talk and so maybe 5-10 minutes. I can send these. There's actually, I don't know if you do YouTubing as part of your, because I'm presuming you studied all Rogerian theory and and do Carl Rogers and stuff. I even know Drop in the Ocean, it's relatively new. I study new stuff all the time. So this is quite new for me. I'm in love with it already. I'll send those. But my last slide before, do you know what, I might leave that for a different lecture because this is a massive subject. I don't know if any of you have heard of open dialogue therapy. It's a network-centered therapy, it's a relationship-centered therapy. People say, oh, it's family counselling. It's actually a bit more complex than that. It's deceptively simple, but I'm on a working model group for it here in WA because it hasn't really landed in WA. No one's sort of doing it. Eastern states have some courses running. America's all over this. A girl from the US, there's pockets. It's coming up all over the world, but this is a way where there's no medication. Nobody gets medicated. You can get 5 days of benzos when you first come in if you're so sleep deprived you can't physically go through the therapy. But 3-hour sessions, 2 therapists, no leading questions. The therapists can reflect to each other, a human response in between. Everything happens in front of the person. No meetings occur when they're not there. You don't have clinical disciplinary team meetings about people, and everything happens in front of them. And it's the dialogue, the philosophy of it is that for people in extreme states, a lot of their problems are in between their relationships. It's like a relational gap that actually just can't just give therapy to this one person and they'll be okay. because all the people around them, so it's that family counselling kind of idea. But this is great, and I'll send a link to, I actually can send some of the research and the papers and stuff, but this really tied into a lot of what I've been saying about just being more human and just having that really authentic relationship building, which really just comes from empathy. I'm sure you've all read lots of definitions on empathy, and I was going to leave one of Carl Rogers' definitions of empathy with you because I loved it. I actually typed it out last night thinking, oh, I'm going to give this out because it's so nice. If you have it already, I'm sorry, but I thought I'd leave it with you because it's a beautiful definition of empathy. And so those are the things that sort of lit up the world for me, those kind of ideas. I'd love to have talked more about open dialogue, but I'm always ambitious, thinking I can talk about things, and then I veer off on stuff. And look what I've done, you haven't spoken. I was really going to make it interactive. I feel quite bad now because I just gabble away because I get very excited. But I'm happy to stay for a few minutes and just take any.
Well, we have time.
Yeah,
we have time for maybe 2 questions.
Yeah, just fire anything at me, or just comments, or come on.
It's really, really good. I'm so inspired. I just want to go good.
What you do? Yeah, I think just go out there and be human and just do what humans do.
Yeah, I think that the amount of passion that you have is really really speaks to in psychotherapy or counselling or whatever word you want to use, is this human to human experience. That saying human to human, it almost feels too simple, but the passion that you brought into the way you talked about it kind of really puts the fireworks in human to
Sometimes
human.
simple things are
Yeah.
better. Don't mess with them. They're good. They work. Simple is good. Yeah. Some reflections.
Well, I hope I'll be able to take that with me. So like you just said, support clients and who they really are, and that's very important to, don't label or, even if I've seen, someone with this condition before, don't put them, I'll try not to anyway,
Just
put
your
them
actions
under,
language.
but it's being aware of that and knowing that, like you said, we're all similar, but we're all different. So I've got that and the importance of that, and it's simple, but I think it's necessary.
And I think the simpler you can be with someone and the simpler the language, doesn't mean you have to come across as sort of speaking slowly, don't patronize them, but just talk. And one really helpful thing my psychologist did once is, sometimes when you've got this tendency, you want to offer the word of the emotion to help them because they're stumbling and you're trying to be helpful, and I do this all the time. I really try to stop doing this. I do sometimes still do it, it's very annoying. But sometimes I found when she just left me floundering, because she said, can you explain what it felt like? Don't tell me emotion, I know you're angry, but can you talk what that felt like in the moment? That's different to saying what emotion is it. You can put a name on anything, but because when I came up with my own, I had all this stuff coming out, and she just sat there, and it's coming out, and I was like, I got this. It was actually, no, it was a bit more, it was like, and I just had all these stories, and when I can name my own experience, if someone just holds that space enough to go, you name it, you tell me what I was like, and we'll talk about that. It's great. Just, go simple. Empathy is something that's deceptively simple. I think there's a lot of complexity, and it's really powerful. It's great stuff that I've read on how, it can be revolution. Actual revolutions that have happened. The ending of slavery was by an empathic move. You can just do amazing things. As professionals, you're going into a wonderful job. I love the field of mental health, and I think that anyone that's involved that can help someone just grow and develop, and at the same time grow and develop themselves and be more empathic, and still love it, and still love their job, and still love people, and be helping other people. Isn't that the best job in the world? Isn't that, Wow.
So I think we're out of time, and everybody let's thank Phoebe for coming and speaking with us today. And and for sharing your story with